Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Getting My Cheese Back on My Cracker, brings to you the State of the Black Man's Mental Health podcast. And today we have an amazing topic, one that I think a lot of us have been dealing within the last at least 4 years, is dealing in the unknown. But before I continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below just to let us know how you're feeling. But I want to bring in the co-hostess with the mostest, Dr. Lotta. Dr. Lotta, introduce yourself once again, please.
Oh man, what an honor to be on the state of the black man's mental health yet again. I'm actually looking forward to today's topic. But I am Dr. Mark Lauda. I'm a clinically practicing critical care cardiothoracic surgery PA. I am the founder of Elevated Black Man, and absolutely excited to be here discussing topics that I think are relative to our audience, to men that are in a position where we can be a little bit more transparent and we can be vulnerable in this arena. So, thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome, awesome. Now I want to get right into it. Today's topic of discussion is change, right? How do we operate in a world where changing is happening on so many different levels? And for you, change is happening in real time, right?
Real time.
Between
Real time.
between your immediate family, your paternal's family, work, your career, life is just moving fast. How are you doing today, sir?
Brother, as the new term, I guess over the last 6 months, I've heard it, life be lifing. So in trying to embrace life be lifing, because that's, part of what we're talking about today. I think the title original was, embracing life changes, the tips for a smooth transition. And for me, I never planned it to be this way. At age 54, I'm enjoying my life, but I'm also at that age where, my three boys are all young men. I had to stop saying boys. They are young men, 21, 23, and 27. So I'm kind of
Mm,
urging them to kind of be on their own. And, I want to be their father instead of their daddy. So navigating that space. Unfortunately, my father, who had lymphoma 2 years ago, it's returned. It's no longer in remission. He's doing well, but he's
mm,
starting some more infusions. So getting to North Carolina. And because of that, my best friend, my wife has supported me in this transition to go home. I haven't been, in North Carolina. I left in 1988 for undergrad, which was in North Carolina. And then after medical school, I went to New York. So it's been since 1997 that I've lived in North Carolina. So we're making that transition now to North Carolina. My wife is, we have a work apartment in Philadelphia for her. She's a public defender there. So it's so many things that are just happening right now. My clinically, I still practice now and I'm in a really good position, but what happens in North Carolina, finding a new job that can be compatible to where I am in life without me having to go back to the very beginning, because I'm not trying to get completely back into the grind. So, um, I'm changing jobs, developing a different part of a distance relationship with my wife. My mental health has to be on point, and I think it goes back to what we've talked about every week. You got to have some mental fortitude, some emotional fortitude to kind of make it through this. So, first thing I'm saying is I have to continue to acknowledge my emotions, because every day there's something different, and I'm not saying it's bad. It's just I have to stay on point. So managing my emotion is the main thing that I've been doing right now. But I'm actually enjoying it. To tell the truth,
mm,
I think at my age right now, hopefully there are things in place where, a lot of this I'm driving. It's not these surprises that happen. I'm having to make the transition because of, something, tragic. Well, I don't want my father's lymphoma to be back, but that's something that I was anticipating. So I'm actually enjoying it. I get to make some moves and decisions that will affect me, but also don't affect my children as much. Some of the decisions I used to make, moving, relocating jobs, you had wife and children to worry about. On this one, I got the support from my wife to move on to go look after family. So here we are.
mm.
Life be life, and
And that's massive.
life.
We constantly talk about community and the importance of community. And your community has allowed you to support your community, right? I.e. your parents and those around you. And so just having that open line of communication with your wife, letting her know that, hey, look, this is where we are, this is what's gonna happen. and her being 100% supportive is massive because it could have gone completely the other direction. And now creating a
Exactly.
rift
And
between
I've
the two
seen
of y'all.
seen many times when it has done that as well.
Mm, mm. Now, now let's talk about life be lifing, right? Like one of the things that you and
Yes.
I one of the things that you and I really focused on was leveraging one day to do the business, right? And so you started doing
Yeah.
your Mondays business focus. How has that been working out for you?
Oh, you just want me to apologize to you. Is that what you want me to do, brother?
No, no, no. I'm
You want me
so
to
so.
apologize to you.
There's a bigger story behind it, right?
Yeah.
You are currently a reservist. You are also a clinician. You're a father. You're a son. You're a husband, and so there are multiple sides of you. And you're a friend. You're a frat
Oh
brother.
yeah.
You're a co-host, right? And so there's so much of you that you have to keep up with on a day-to-day basis. But
Correct.
and once again, I'm bringing you guys a little bit behind the scenes. There are times where you don't know up from down, not because you don't know, is you've been living kind of fly by the seat of my pants, and it's not a
Yeah.
malicious act. It's just because life has been lifing, and the fact that you're taking the effort to organize some of what you can, right? It's I'm hoping it's at least making things easier for you.
Oh, it's made it tremendously easier. I think that, one of the things I did, when I'm doing my personal work, as long as I have time to do it, I would do it. And I felt like in most cases I was making probably the deadlines that I wanted to make. Sometimes maybe I wasn't, but I had time to do it. But what I've managed in this transition, again, we always talk about time management and maintaining routines, self-care routines, but regular routines. So for me, setting a specific work day, and that work day being specifically Monday mornings, where I can utilize that time for not only self-care, but I can use it for the personal work on my individual foundation. I can use it for returning phone calls. I can do it for all those things that I just have on that list to knock off, and I would just do it at any time. And what that has allowed me is more personal space, actually. It's allowed me more dedicated space. So that's a good thing. Again, flying by the seat of my pants was fun because I could do it and was keeping up. But still, there's a management that has to come within that to be able to maintain those routines. And, that it'll humble you in the long run. It takes away some of the potential anxiety, potential stress that you may have. So I am going to apologize to you because you were one of the main people on me saying, okay, you got to have a set day. It's not that hard. You got to have a set day. But I was just enjoying having the routine move. So I do not apologize. I absolutely thank you for that because it means a lot, and that's not only what friends are for, but you may have saw one part of my mental state that I didn't see. And I always tell brothers when they ask you, how am I doing? I said, if you're a friend of mine, you really should know how I'm doing. I mean, if you're
Right.
intimate with me, you probably saw some things maybe I didn't. And in my mind, I was enjoying just moving around. So yeah, it's huge. It's definitely important to do that and marking your schedule. I mean, I have to turn that on you because I've seen you work in your environment and going away from your home to a work home, especially because you could work from your living room, but you've chosen to go
Mhm.
somewhere else to get those things done. I mean, it's a great place you go. I don't know if we can um, give some pub to that spot, but you do a really good spot. So I navigate some of that from you,
Yeah,
definitely.
and one of the things that I noticed about myself, at least, was that I had to at least select a day to do the things that I deem important, right? I noticed myself going into
Hmm.
these.
Hmm.
I'm gonna start something, then stop, start, then stop, and so selecting a day to focus on whether it's content, whether, like you said, getting back to emails, working on the podcast.
Hmm.
Um, having those days allowed me to do so much work ahead of time. So, like, for example, we have
Yeah.
podcast episode topics till like January of next year, right? And that's just me walking
Hmm.
through things that are in my mind, and I think other people would be interested in it as well. On top of
Yeah.
that, as you know, I started my workout regime in the mornings.
Day
Um,
you're on what,
you
day
know,
14 or 15 now?
I'm day 15, day 16. So, one of the things that I started to realize was, the pants were getting a little snug. And I was feeling a little sluggish on a regular basis. And I realized that, I changed, I've removed myself from the routine of remaining active, right?
Okay.
In a work from home environment, it's easy to just chill on the couch, chill on the bed. Um, just not move around as much and just watch your body start to kind of like grow away, not even wither away, but grow away, because we in the South and everything tastes good to me. So I'm trying everything and
Hmm.
going
Hmm.
everywhere. And so it's never been a situation of, I don't know, that's not healthy. It's, let's try it, we like it, we don't. In
Exactly.
addition to, I mentally felt great. I emotionally was more present. I was in a place of discomfort, right? Because, you
Hmm.
know, I I was trying to find myself again in the mundane, working every day, coming home, or working every day, disconnecting, watching TV, doing all these things. I realized, like, what am I really doing? What am I really doing with my day? And as far as changes go,
Hmm.
like I said earlier, the last 4 years, I mean, for me, the change started in about 2018. Um, 2018 was the year I took in my dad and was his full time caregiver. And for those of you that are
Yeah.
caregivers, bless your souls. Thank you for all the prayers, because it's not easy, right? Um, you
Correct.
know, and it's also not a burden, because I'm fortunate enough of my siblings to be able to take care of my father. I have the resources, I had the space, I had the time and the work from home, right? Work from home for me has been something for
Makes a difference.
a little over 15 years now. You know what I mean? And so being able to provide for him in his need was one of the biggest changes, shifts for me, because I'm
Hmm.
transitioning from
Hmm.
son to caregiver, right? I'm transitioning from this person that was larger than life to this person that I have to help with little things here and there. And then we have a
Yeah.
pandemic. How do we adjust to this new way of moving around? Talking about, we were in sheltering in place, social distance restrictions. Once
Hmm.
again, for me, I was already doing it because I was
You're
working
already
from
there.
home. But, my wife, we met during the pandemic. For her, dating was difficult, right? Because we had to adjust to, all right, there are certain places we can go, certain places we can't go. I'm an international traveler. So a lot of my travel was stunted during the pandemic. And so what we ended up doing was
Exactly.
we adjusted with the times. We found some random bikes that we found somewhere, some store. She found some store somewhere in New York. We got two mountain bikes and my car. We took the car. We went, I think, as far as Maine. We went down to Florida. We went down to the West Coast. So we really took
Nice.
the opportunity to kind of embrace the domestic travel. Because prior to, it was like, okay, which passport stamp are we getting this time? You know what I mean? And then fast forward to now, everything's opening back up. You now have people. My job is sometimes asking me to come in person, and for me, our entire team is remote. And so it's not like for you when you go into the
Okay.
office, it's like your supportive staff is there, your surgeons are there, the nurses are there,
Hmm.
administration is there. For me, it's an office of people that I barely know that I got to
Strangers.
go in and
Yeah.
interact with, right? And so, and for me,
Yeah.
it's, our job functions don't even come close. So it's you know getting me into the office is like, probably one of the toughest things that you can do. But that
Correct.
adjustment also allows us to, one of the things that I said that I'm gonna do these next couple of years is learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Because we know change is not
Hmm.
easy. It's never easy, especially when it comes to changing who you got to take care of, changing work, changing finances. You know, in our household, we've had a shift in, who is the breadwinner, right? And that shift
Right.
has been something that's been an interesting dynamic because we've always been equally contributing to the household. And, you know, I didn't realize how that change had an adverse effect, right? Not feeling like you can contribute had an
Mhm.
adverse effect. And for me, it's constantly, I got us. But on the other side of my head is like, what else do I got to do to make sure I got us, right? It's
Exactly.
it's the other things on top of the day job that I'm constantly trying to see what hits to determine what got us. So I think in these last, for me, maybe was it 2014, last 6 years or so has been a constant change. But the saving grace is
Yeah.
my ability and my desire to adapt and make a situation better than it could have been.
Correct. In that adaptation, you have to think about, I think some of the things that you're saying is you've been able to kind of focus on some of the things that you can control, especially going into that in the beginning, and now this reverse transition. And I think, that influence is very important because if you can't identify those aspects, then you're going to go into that kind of spin or circle. So I applaud you for identifying part of your purpose. And we know when there's money involved in the switches, and then again they say twice a child, once a man. So then going into the aspect of looking after your father as if you're now the father and he's the son, that says a whole lot. So again, embracing those changes. So that I think that's very important when those transitions happen. The ability to embrace it, the ability to tell yourself if you have to expect some change. If things stay in a steady state, sometimes you would want it, but you would still miss out on certain things. So those strategies I
So
think that you just mentioned, I think are very important. You were able to kind of align yourself to those challenges, and so far you survived. But I'm sure that
listen, I'm still
requires
here.
some
But
support.
did you die?
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
I'm gonna get a shirt. But did you die?
Bingo.
But so let me
Did
ask
you
you
die?
this, right? Like when
Uh-huh.
change happens, what are some things that go through your mind, right? Perfect example. The changing your time schedule in your day job shifted over time. It's not like it was an overnight thing. But when that idea came,
Mhm.
like, yo, I need to do less days. I just need to do this one day and focus on the rest of my life. What was that change for you that made you like, this has to happen?
Oh boy, you're digging holes now. So again, that all goes back again to, like you said, all that transition that happened around 2020 between COVID, between me having a surgery that didn't go so well on my hand, to COVID itself. My hospital that I worked at, we implemented the vaccine and we lost some employees because of it. The amount of work time that was isolated from certain physicians or APPs not able to cover shifts. So for me, it was a transition of me leaving the operating room and now looking at critical care only, which I absolutely enjoy and love as well. But the benefit before then, we were doing 24-hour calls anyway. We would do two a week. And then you have your regular work schedule. And, some people didn't like that. So I immediately just started only doing 24-hour shifts. It usually was kind of two a week. And then over time, as time moved on, we had more staff kind of to come in, and between the surgery and just life and other ventures, me wanting to start my foundation, Elevated Black Man, I decided at this age of mid 50s, I'm 54 years old, that I got to jump out the window. I have to go ahead and take that chance to focus on me, to give myself the opportunity to live life in different ways, because again, my children are older now. My wife is in her second career and locked in, so this is a time that I get to say, well, what about me? And the answer to that question is, I'm awesome. It's all about me, so let's move in a direction, and how can I make that happen? So luckily, in the hospital that I work, I was able to really negotiate being a casual employee. And the day that they needed the most assistance is on Wednesday. So I continued doing 24-hour shifts. And how that benefited me was, one, it gave me more time on both ends. It gave me more time now while I don't have responsibility of other people to spend more time with myself. I started doing, sabbaticals. I started doing my road trips to North Carolina to spend more time with my family, going places, coming to visit you the first time. I had time on my schedule that I could do it and didn't have to take vacation days and things of that nature. So while it was, I think it was easier than done because again, I don't want to say it in the wrong way, but I didn't have to worry about finances as much. So it wasn't so much of I got to work this many hours. I have to do this because I was taking care of myself through insurance policies and all kinds of things. So that made a huge difference. So the 1 day a week actually works well. I mean, if there's a way to design it and I can make more money, it would be awesome. But I'm comfortable with it
Mm.
because it helped me cultivate that growth mindset. And I think you hear that a lot in certain talking circles about having a growth mindset. So for me, I was definitely able to cultivate that. And so I saw that life transition as an opportunity completely for personal growth and learning. I'm a lifelong learner. So that's I don't know. It's just a wonderful space to be in. And again, the transition wasn't that hard. It just took the fortitude for me to kind of make the decision. I still had to, have some time management, and to the point of, again, like we started this conversation, I was enjoying it way too much because I was just kind of flying by the seat of pants, getting things done. But it was well worth it. I'm very grateful. I definitely will say that.
Now, now, what does that
Definitely.
conversation look like with your partner when you guys are making these changes, right? And I know once again, these are changes made more so for you, but some of these have not adverse. There's an effect, right? For every
Mhm.
cause, there's an effect. How did
Correct.
you bring this conversation up with your partner, and how was it received initially? Because there's the initial response, and then there's a response after it's been kind of settled in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, I think I was blessed that I didn't, have many issues because my partner and I communicate very well, and she left the medical profession and went back to law school as an adult. And so when she finished law school was right about the time that all these things were happening, and in her support of me because again, I was supporting the family, her and three kids and the cats and everything else, and she recognized that. And so for that, her thing was, I am now on the other side. I appreciate you for all that you've done. Go live your life. Go set us up in North Carolina because we are going to eventually be there. Or even in the downtime, she was the first one to encourage me to do the sabbaticals because she would do a beach trip every year on her own where she'd go and unplug and unwind and all of that. And I've never been man enough to do that. So that was one of those things. So I think it was just setting the realistic expectations. We were open, honest about the situation. Again, our children were older now. They didn't require as much time. Matter of fact, at that age, we needed to push them a little bit more. The part of that independence comes from not being there for them. Sounds a little rude, but that's true. So I think it really came from just the communication that we have always had for the most part, being realistic about what our future holds, where we're going to end up. What she's doing right now as a public defender in Philadelphia, it takes a lot of time. So it also merged and matched well because now that she's new into her career, like any career, you got to dive in head first. So it works out really well. Gives her a lot of time, gives me a lot of time. And this is a little personal, but if you think about it, neither one of us have ever lived on our own before. So having two different locations, it takes a lot of communication, but it also gives us that freedom that we've never had. You grow up with brothers and sisters, you go to college, you have a roommate, you get out of college, you still have roommates, you
Hmm.
find somebody you date, you get married, you have kids. And so this was the first time that we've ever been able to, as adults, spend time to ourselves. And that helps out. Tremendously because again it gives us time to grow, gives us time to miss each other and have some freedom. So I think is a positive
Mm.
thing, but it really comes down to the communication, setting realistic expectations, and even having developing some resiliency. Resiliency is always important with everything. So those practices that I had to engage in, that she had to engage in as well, to be able to build that resilience. And we talk about it in every show: mindfulness, positive self talk, and to this degree, sometimes there is some problem solving that also has to come in, and it again absolutely works well. Absolutely, because we could never be necessarily in the same place anyway to work together. But from a living situation, it's worked out well, absolutely well,
Mm.
and the impact
So,
impact is going to go much further. We're adulting. We're finally
uh,
getting a chance to adult without kids being involved.
I feel you.
Exactly.
I feel, and it sounds like you found strategies to cope with the changes as they come about, right? And it sounds like the number one tool in your toolkit is communication, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, when these changes are occurring, it's let me make sure I communicate with the parties that are necessary to that are affected by this, right? By this change. And it sounds like one of
Yeah.
the biggest things
Yeah.
that you and your partner do, you guys have effective, and I mean, I'm jealous because I'm trying to get there, right? Effective communication, and it takes time. You guys have been together for a long time, and understanding one another and understanding how these changes are um, impacting your lives. That communication, without
Correct.
that, I mean, I can only imagine how things are. You're in one city, she's in another city, and the communication is horrible. You wouldn't be smiling as much as you do right
That
now.
developed with time, though. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It developed with time though, because she'll be the first to tell you coming into this, we came from two different type of families, and with any type of transition, communication is important. But she probably was an over communicator, and I was an under communicator, and I'm just now learning to kind of come up, and she's coming. You know what I mean? So that it came over time. We haven't always communicated this well, especially with raising children. We both came up with two different fundamental aspects of children. So in that transition from single to having kids to now kind of being single. It's not single, but you know what I mean. Without the kids,
Hmm.
it definitely takes a lot of communication, and a lot of it is on my part. That's part of that transition that I have had to make. Is now that there is some absence, I have to communicate better. I definitely have to communicate better. And some of that for me is, I've type out a schedule and give her a schedule for my trips over the next 2, 3 months, whether it be a football game, whether it be a conference, and not so much for accountability. It's just her schedule is much busier than mine. And so that way I would realize that, oh, where are you this weekend? And I'm like, I gave you that last week. And she's like, oh, yeah, I forgot. So now I just put it out on the calendar. And that's part of something I've learned to do so that I wouldn't get frustrated over, but I just told you. But that's something that develops over time. Again, setting schedules and being consistent with time management. So it's worked out well, but I don't want to mislead the audience and think that we've always communicated because we've been together so long. Nah, I think we communicate
so
better now because of it.
So
Exactly.
you mentioned earlier your children, right? And I think that's probably one of the biggest changes you guys have experienced, because you have your children from time they're born till they're about 18 or so, until you can actually kick them out. How was that, having an empty nest for the first time? Because that must have been like, you're is it like a phantom limb? You're forgetting they're not upstairs, or how was that change? Because
Yeah,
that
no,
too
I
is
think
also
that's
a
an
life
adjustment
change.
as well. Yeah, I think that's an adjustment as well, and that comes a little bit different for me. It was great. It was absolutely wonderful. But in today's age and time, I think a lot of people will tell you, unlike before, where I think it was a little bit easier to have an empty nest because children, we were excited to just get away kind of deal. Now kids can't really afford to be away. There are very few parents, unless they're just really, really well off, that the kids don't fly back home. That nest is only empty for a little while. So in the
Mm.
time for me that it was empty, it was absolutely wonderful. For my wife, again, she was coming out of law school around that time, so it was a little bit different from her because she still was accustomed to her time down, the boys being around. So for her, I think it was a little bit hard. I'm not going to speak for her, but for me, man, it was the best thing in the world. I could do what I want to do, come and go, that kind of thing. But as life happened, I had kids that came home after my oldest came home after college, was here for a little while before moving back out, and then my youngest, which happened to be unfortunately a COVID kid, his last 2 years in high school was during COVID. So he went away for his freshman year to a different city. And with adjustments, he ended up coming back home to go to a school closer. My middle son, he's out enjoying life. He's in a whole other state, working and beginning life. And so I think it just varies. So then I had to learn to how, again, not only communicate, but to be effective as a parent in those situations. For me, when I left for college, I never came back home, but I think that was a different type of motivation. And also being broke in the late 90s is a little bit different than being broke, I think, in 2024, because there's so many things that, I could do with a roommate. And now, I mean, a single apartment is just as expensive as college tuition.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
can't speak for parents, but for me, I really enjoyed that empty nest. It was a great transition. It was an easy transition for me, but at the same time, you can only have an empty nest for so long these days. Even with some of the kids, not some of the kids, a lot of kids that are graduating from college and their majors can't get jobs, or their entry pay level is very, very entry. So we
Mm.
have to help our kids some, to a certain degree, but you got to give them the tough love too. So that probably has been harder than I'm probably making it, especially for them. I do realize for them it's not as been as easy. But as a father, still we have to be able to give them the opportunity to grow. I mean, you're going to have to go without certain things. You got to fall and bump your head. You got to go hungry a few days. That's just my philosophy. Some people may not agree with that, but part of that transition of manhood is knowing when you can stand on your own, and yet at the same time know when you got to raise your hand and ask for help. And for me, that's one of the hardest things. I never wanted my children to raise their hand, so I probably was there a little bit more. Whereas my wife's
Mm.
like, go bump your head. So that, again, that's one of those communication.
Right, right.
Yeah, the emptiness
And
ain't is and completely empty.
and once again, I think we're making adjusting to life changes a little too easy for most people. Cuz
Mhm.
everybody may not be as fortunate as to be able to kind of be equipped with the tools that we've realized that okay, sometimes I need to take a couple of steps back, assess the situation, and kind of move
Yeah.
forward. So with that being said, what are some tools that you would give somebody that is going through a life change or is going through a transition, and it's daunting, right? Life changes can be anxiety inducing, especially if you seriously don't know
Mhm.
what's going to happen next or what you're going to do next. Um, and we're the generations behind us may not have the tough love experience that we used to have, which we built,
Mhm.
like we're built for tough. We were drinking out the hose, we were eating off the ground, 5-second rules and
Six
everything,
second rule.
right? But
Yeah.
today, it's a different person coming up, and change isn't always easily adapted to. So, what are some tools that
Okay.
we can give some of our audience members that are going through a change right now, and it's just too much to deal with?
Yeah, so when you add on the last part, too much to deal with, that goes back to, again, the whole purpose of this podcast and communication with brothers is, you got to sometimes seek support. That thing that is too much, you got to be able to rely on other people sometimes. Set realistic expectations and have a support group. For some of the things that you cannot handle, try your best to be able to delegate that to those people that support you, those around you. Being mindful of those things. You can't handle all things, so you have to be able to focus on sometimes, little bits at a time. Therapy, having a therapist, again, we can't talk enough about that. Having a therapist that can help you align, or a men's coach like myself that can help you align, those things that you need for success. We know that financial security is important, so try not to bite off more than you can handle. In transition, sometimes you have to let go of some of the needs you may want to financially, for it to be critical and financially stable. Work-life balance, that's always something that we have to kind of worry about. Work-life balance, and when you focus on yourself and if you put yourself first, I think that balance automatically comes. Usually when that work-life balance gets too much is because you're giving too much to other people. Friends, family, social support is extremely important. um, leaning on those people that care and love you more than just your colleagues. Your colleagues, I don't think, will always have that vested interest in you, whether it be in your new profession or old profession. And something that we don't talk about enough with men is self esteem. I think one of the tools that you have in transition is you have to have strong self esteem, knowing that you're going to make it through it. There's always something, life be life, and there's always going to be something. I think grandma would always say you're either in the middle of the storm, coming out of a storm, or getting ready to go into one. So wherever you are in that, just stay focused and kind of push through that, because if you don't, you're going to get caught up with it. And that's when we lead into those, mental health issues of stress and anxiety that happens with almost anything if it's not controlled. And certainly life transitions can do that to you. And here's another part that we don't talk about enough is, so in some transitions, there's also some grief and loss, whether it be changing a job, moving to a new city, promotions. All those things can come with grief and loss, because you're moving from something you're accustomed to something new. And we can't just forget about the past. Even some great situations can become one of those things of loss. And loss doesn't have to be bad, but it can take an adjustment. You get a new job and you're used to, having lunch from 12 to 1:30 because it's a working lunch, and you go somewhere else and they only give you 45 minutes. You might be making more money, but that's still a loss. So you have to kind of think
Right.
about that grief and loss, whether it be in relationships. No different than just general environmental change. You're going to have those cycles. But I think those are probably the most important. Social connections, being able to have the discipline for yourself, practicing gratitude, practicing mindfulness, and just staying positive. Because things will always sometimes be more than you can handle, but um, it always works out. The way I always look at it,
Mm.
always works out. And that sounds like an old person, but as long as you keep moving forward, it's always going to work out. And when it's not going to work out, you can't take it on your own. Again, involve your circle, involve your friends, involve your family, some type of support system. I know this is not applicable to everybody, but I think for the majority of people, it is. I think a lot of times we are selfish enough that we don't know how to lean on other people or look at the positive side of most things. The glass is half full versus overflowing. But you can't forget about self. So the whole self care area is very important. Very important.
Mm. That's dope. That's dope. I mean, that's a lot for people to kind of take in and realize that community is key. Community is key. Find you for the brothers. Find you a men's circle, men's support group, coach. We at a second chance have the men's roundtable where we
Hmm.
create a space for Black brothers to just talk, get out what you need to get out. I know I've used it multiple times. Dr. Mark, taps in periodically to just kind of provide where he's at in life. Um, or maybe not. Maybe just receive the messages as they come. And if they fuel you, they fuel you. I think um, there is a misconception of being engaged always have to be you talking every day or contributing every
Right.
day. No, like we want you to gauge when you feel most comfortable, you know. And as long as the community is feeding you, for us, that's the most important thing is how can we
Exactly.
continue to provide you some value as opposed to constantly taking from you. With that being
Correct.
said, Dr. Mark, I think this was a dope conversation. Do you want to leave us with any last remarks?
Again, I'm just happy to be here and speaking to brothers. Again, I really want you to focus on yourself. Life be life, and transitions are going to happen. Even if you're at a steady spot in your life right now, at some point there's going to be a little bit rocky, and that's what makes you stronger. I think the resilience and grit that it takes to survive these days is most important. But you are enough. You are absolutely enough. In this transition, think about yourself. Think about those things that you want to happen, and I think they will. It's gonna not always be easy, but pour into yourself. I mean, just pour into yourself through all these transitions. We talked about breathing techniques. Again, professional help if necessary, and community. This commune is huge.
Mm, mm. And
That's
once
where I would.
again, this is
Exactly.
the state of the Black man's mental health. Another great podcast episode with another big, great Black man. Until next time, peace.